Western Europe, or what used to be Western Europe, is nowadays very, very multicultural, very multiracial. About 10% of citizens residing now in the European Union, and I'm specifically referring to Western Europe.
The Swedish police have released a map of 55 areas which they admit to having surrendered total control of to predominantly Muslim criminal gangs.
Out of 40 million people, 10% are of non-European extraction. And one of the first generation, second generation, and third generation. Now, irony is that thanks, under quotation marks, thanks to communism, thanks to communist legacy, Eastern Europe, meaning Croatia, Hungary, Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, Czechia nowadays, Romania, including Russia itself, which used to be very, very repressive countries during the Cold War. Nowadays, believe it or not, they are more European than West European countries. So this is probably the blessing. History is very unpredictable. We once, including my family, we suffered a great deal under communism in ex-Yugoslavia, but nowadays the countries which emerged on the ruins of ex-Yugoslavia are literally, I don't want to say 100%, but 99% racially homogeneous. Which means that people who live there, who reside there, are of European extraction. They're natives. They're not Arabs. They're not Turks. They're not Muslims. There are very few of them, of course. Having said that, I'm not ruling out that thanks, or rather due to the pressure of the European Union, and now they call it the quota systems. According to this quota system now, which has been imposed by the European Union, and they are the big movers and shakers, East European countries, which by and large are still very homogeneous, racially, ethnically, linguistically, whichever way we look at it, should be or might be forced to accept their quota of non-European migrants. And of course now there is a big stir, a brawl actually going on. Some countries, including Czechia, Hungary, Poland, yes, Poland, they formed what they call it the Visegrad group. They are parts and parcels of the European Union, but they just want to pursue their own policy without receiving dictates or ukases, as we say, or decrees from Brussels. They said in a diplomatic fashion, well, no way, Jose, we are not going to accept the decrees by the European Union. We are not going to create sanctuary cities in our countries. We suffered long time, for 45 years under communism. We have enough of impoverished population of our own native folks, and there is no way we want to create a new balkanized Eastern Europe. And of course there is a great rift now between quote-unquote rich countries in the Western Europe, in the European Union, notably Germany, France, to some extent the UK. Of course the UK bailed out of the European Union, so it's no longer there, but it's still there to some extent for another couple of years. And former communist countries, which are also now part and parcel of the European Union, bloc countries, 28 of them, but there is again this rift. It's a funny rift. Once upon a time it was the Iron Curtain, which separated communist Europe, where I was born, Eastern Europe, of course, from Western Europe, and now, ironically, we are better off in a sense that we don't want to allow those masses of undocumented, we're talking about millions of those people, are not interested in asking for political asylum at the first country that they're entering, which means Greece or Turkey. Quite to the contrary, they want to go all the way up to Sweden and to Germany, and we know for which reasons and for what reasons. The social welfare is much better over there, and on top of it, corrupted elites, I need to tell that word, I need to say that word, corrupted elites in Germany are literally inviting them, come over, you wretched of the earth. This is definitely the gravest problem that Europe is facing, because this is something unprecedented in our history. And I don't even want to call it the migration of peoples. I would call it the replacement of peoples, rather, because what's going on literally in Europe, both in Eastern Europe and in Western Europe, is it's not just a replacement of cultures, ladies and gentlemen, but also the replacement of allow me the word, of different gene pools, of different races. There is no way whatsoever those people can be ever integrated in their new quote-unquote homelands. Why didn't they travel first to nearby countries such as Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Iraq, which are certainly either by their gene pool, either by their racial tree, or either by their culture or by their religion, mostly Islam. They're much closer to them. But then again, I don't want to blame them, and this is something I need to stress. I don't want to blame those migrants, mostly Muslim migrants coming from Central Asia and coming from Northern Africa, specifically from Libya, Algeria, and Senegal as well, somewhat down south. They're coming primarily because of the relinquishment. I'm searching for the better word. Because of the cowardice of white Western elites. So never, please, never ever blame the migrants. Of course, they're just the offshoot, they're just a reaction to this exit from history on the part of white European elites. What I mean by white European elites, I'm specifically referring to liberals and post-Marxists. And of course, on the institutional level, I'm referring to the European Union and to the European Commission. Probably in the United States, this institutional issue isn't being debated as it probably should. But basically, the European Union and the European Commission, which consists of 25, 28 commissars and with a huge bureaucracy as sidekicks, they're the ones who make executive decisions. And they are the ones actually who extended their welcoming cries to those wretched of the earth. They are far from being wretched of the earth, as I mentioned earlier, because if somebody asks for political asylum, according to our standard laws and legislation, they should ask for political asylum and for refugee, or for, let's call it in the American way, sanctuary city in the first country, which is Greece, or for that matter Turkey. No way. They don't want to stay in Greece. They don't want to ask for asylum even in Serbia on this famous Balkan route. They don't want to even stay in Croatia, where I live for the time being. They don't even want to stay in Slovenia, next door. Miss Melanie Trump, you know, the spouse of Mr. Trump, she's from there, 20 miles from where I live. They want to go, they have this fixed idea, let's go to Germany, let's go to Sweden. And the answer is quite simple, ladies and gentlemen. The welfare system in Germany is excellent in comparison to other welfare systems in Eastern Europe. If it was only Soros, that would solve our problem, but there are lots of them that are covered under those fancy names of humanitarian organizations, tolerant organization, peaceful organization. Being born in communist Yugoslavia, I know very well, I understand this meta language very well. So when somebody tells me, Tom, you are my friend, I know that he is my worst enemy. You don't have to show me that you're my friend. I know, I can tell it right away. So the same thing can be applied to Soros. When he actually pontificates about changing the world, making one global world, transgender, transsexual, borderless world, I can tell you this is not just a joke, this is a very dangerous joke which can spit us again into terrible wars and chaos. And I simply wonder why either Mr. Trump or somebody in his administration or from DOJ or for some other institutions are not filing charges against him for some illegal speculations.
Clearly, I consider the Trump administration a danger to the world, but I regard it as a purely temporary phenomenon that will disappear in 2020 or even sooner.
What he has been doing is simply against the law of the land. What he did in Hungary was he actually financed back in the 90s, early even in the 80s, he financed different groups which were destabilizing, which were actually sapping the government's authority. So I guess there can be legal issues that can be found and have him I don't want to say indicted, but at least some files can be charged, or at least what Orban did. He didn't kick him out, but he threw him out. He told him, well, sir, you have nothing else to do. Orban, prison Orban in Hungary, right?
the Hungarian people have a very clear position about illegal migration. And they say they don't want this illegal migration. They want this illegal migration flow to be stopped.
Can you explain for our viewers the link between George Soros and illegal migration? Because
yes, by each and every means possible, he tries to promote migration through towards Europe, and he has got ideas, which I mean, of course, everybody has his or her ideas. That's fine, but he uses all possible means to influence election campaigns, to influence politics, to really have a without any legitimacy, and that's the problem. Without any legitimacy, to get involved and influence the inner politics of given countries. That is also the fact in Hungary, and he's trying to promote in with each and every possible mean migration, and that's his idea that migration is a good thing, and that's what he states all over. It's fine, but we don't let him to do this if he does not respect the laws, and if he's trying to manipulate, and if he's trying to get involved in the Hungarian politics without having any political legitimacy for that. He's also free to found a party. He's also free to run for elections. He could also run for being the Prime Minister of Hungary.
The SPLC, I can tell you firsthand, since I lived in communist Yugoslavia, SPLC reminds me very much of our commissariats. We call them commissariats. We have one in a high school, in a gymnasium, what we called the gymnasium back then, education as well. Every department had his own commissariat. It was a communist, which enforced the Marxist dogma and the political correct, and also the political correctness in language and syntax and how you actually communicate with the people. This was the common law. And in fact, basically the SPLC is a carbon copy of those. I don't want to call them Marxists. They don't want to call themselves Marxists either. They're not that stupid. They're smart. But basically the practice they use is the old Bolshevik, or rather old Cheka practice, which was used in the early Bolshevik Russia in the early 90s. My field is comparative semantics, and I'll be talking about this tomorrow during my speech on fake news in Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And what I'm basically seeing now with the SPLC, it's just it's amazing how many parallels I see with those different commissariats for ethnic sensitivity training. Now this is called ethnic sensitivity training here in the United States of America. Back in communist Yugoslavia, which was also a multicultural, multi-ethnic state, we call it the same way. We call it the Committee for Bringing Unity Between Different People. So the wording was somewhat different, but the idea was the same. So when you actually moved away a little bit from this one-way dogma, you had serious problems. You couldn't get a job, you were fired. Well, like myself, I wish I could teach at some university, and I could teach classics, not necessarily about Jews or race or whatever. I could teach classics in French or German, but there is no way I can do it, precisely because the SPLC over the last 20 years has exerted tremendous pressure on ratting out, bad word, on ratting out professors of this guilt by association, and by firing professors, non-tenured professors from different universities, including a good friend of mine, Kevin McDonald. Well, he was lucky, he was tenured, so he couldn't lose a job, but it was nonetheless, he had bad time. So basically, I have no good opinion of SPLC. I only hope, given that this is a free country, that this is still a First Amendment. I'm surprised that the SPLC has not been banned as a hate-inspiring and hate-inciting organization by Congress or by whatever, by some higher institution, by Ministry of Justice. I guess I would certainly encourage Mr. Trump to consider banning the SPLC as an organization that actually spurs the hatred, that creates a havoc, that actually incites to hatred. Right. So it's a hate group. Yes, SPLC is a hate group.